Welcome to this month's episode of the Chronicles of Justice, the Yolo County District Attorney's Office podcast series. Today we're going to be talking about the relationship between vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians and how we all share the street. And we're going to be focusing in on aspects of education, awareness, and prevention so both motorists and bicyclists can avoid collisions. With so many bicycles on the road in Yolo County, and in particular in Davis, it can be a little bit more challenging to make your way around town. Some have even named Davis the bike capital of the United States. But we know that the streets are for people, all people, even if their mode of transportation is a bicycle instead of a vehicle. Today, we are going to be joined by the bike campaign's Maria Contreras Tebbutt, along with Davis Police Department Bike Officer Mike Yu. Thank you all for joining us today. Maria, let's get started with you. What is the bike campaign?
Thanks for inviting me here today, Kevin. And we're excited about the bike campaign. We've been going about 5.5 years. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, a group of volunteers whose number one objective is to greatly increase bike trips, especially to schools.
And what are some other things that you do besides that?
Well, one of the projects of the bike campaign is the bike garage. We found that many people aren't riding their bikes because they have a flat tire, or maybe they feel uncomfortable or nervous about riding in the street. Maybe the last time they rode a bike they were 8 years old, and now they're a student at UC Davis, and they feel nervous about getting onto the campus and through the streets because they've never ridden in urban car traffic.
Speaking specifically of the bike garage, what are you doing with that?
Well, we have a team of wonderful volunteers that get the bike up and rolling. A lot of times people have difficulty in the street because the bike may not be at its optimal health. And the rider may not know what they're doing either. Most riders, I'd say about 90% of all riders, don't know what the hand signal is for stop. So they can't show this to the driver because they don't know what it is. And the driver, in fact, may no longer recognize what the hand signal for stop is either. Knowing what side of the road to ride on, knowing that you're not supposed to be on the sidewalk and why that's dangerous. Hundreds of things that make riding a bike easier, make it easier to have a great relationship in conjunction with cars in the street, knowing how we're supposed to treat pedestrians, who's got the right of way, how to get through big intersection. All of these things can be overwhelming, but are easily taught when you have people around you who have more bike riding experience and are also drivers, both.
Okay. Thank you so much for bringing that to our community. So now let's discuss a little bit about motorists and bicycles and how they are sharing the road. What should motorists know about sharing the road with bicycles, especially in a place like Yolo County, in particular Davis, where there's more bicycles on the road than normal?
Number one, we don't have an us against them attitude when we go out onto the street. So whether you're in a car, you're on a bike, or you're walking, it's all of us all together. And when we look at somebody that's walking or we look at somebody that is riding a bike from the perspective of being inside of a vehicle, I would hope that we feel a lot of compassion in our hearts and imagine that this is our little sister, this is our mother, this is our brother, this is our grandfather who's on the other side of the street from us. And we want to be caring for one another when we're in the street, especially when we're driving 3,000 pounds of metal.
So the people that are in vehicles have that protection, which is the outside protection of the vehicle, and bicyclists don't. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Well, there's an awful lot of distractions inside the car, inside the driver's mind, around the car, on the streets. There's a lot going on. So I would say the number one thing to do when driving is to simply focus on driving. You may be looking at 13 different signs surrounding you when you're driving your car. Which ones are the ones you need to pay attention to? Did you see what the speed limit was on the street that you were on? Or did you just assume that you would go as fast as everybody else is going? So we need to be very, very vigilant. We need to open up our eyes and get rid of all distractions.
That is true. Since we're talking about that, are collisions between bicyclists and motorists preventable?
Yes, I really believe they are. There's really no accidents when it comes to being in a car. One, you choose to be in a car versus taking a different or lighter form of transportation. It's a choice. We could be reducing our car trips, and that would reduce the number of collisions that take place. Sometimes people don't think of that as the most obvious intervention. we want to make sure that we're just aware of the fact that there's other people out there, and are we fully capable of driving? I've seen people that have had strokes and are using walkers get into a car and drive away. Mm-hmm. Why is that? We may not have the physical capability. One of the questions I ask people is, have you thought about what you will do when you can no longer drive? For whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Could be age, ability to see, physical limitations, the fact that some people can't pivot their head all the way over to their shoulder so that they can look behind them. Mm-hmm. So make sure you're really truly qualified to drive. I would also like to see more education in introducing drivers to how the roads are changing, that bicycles are using our streets, new infrastructure and pavement markings are going in that many people may not be aware of or know what they mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially you see a lot with the countries outside of the U.S., there's a lot more training and awareness because bicycles are used so frequently and so often. They're kind of intertwined and driving around there, whereas here sometimes you see a bicyclist in the road and you think, okay, what am I supposed to do?
Nobody knows what they're supposed to do. That's the reality. And so this education needs to start very young. And right now we're working with 2 school districts, Woodland and Davis school districts, to say, please let us come and reach out to parents that are transitioning their kids into kindergarten, where we may be establishing the transportation patterns for a household for 12 to 13 years and maybe longer. And things are changing so fast in the transportation scene that we want to encourage more people to break down the habits of using cars for short distances. And most of those short distance trips are happening between the home and where people go to school. In Davis, it could be, students still trying to drive cars onto campus and park, and it's really not a feasible way to get around a small community. And they may not feel confident riding a bike. That could be overcome with education, support, and encouragement.
From the bicyclist perspective, how can collisions be preventable as well?
Well, one, we need to make ourselves as highly visible as possible. And wearing the right kind of clothing that just is bright green or Caltrans orange certainly makes you stand out much more than when we're wearing our traditional dark colors. And sometimes people don't understand that on a foggy day or a cloudy day that we need to improve our visibility. We're not just talking about being seen at night. Certainly following the law and remembering that it's required that we have 8 reflectors on our bicycle. Most people don't know that, and for many people, those reflectors are all missing, making it almost impossible to see somebody, even if they have a headlight or a little tiny light in the back. Often, drivers will see a bicyclist going through an intersection in the side view, and that's where the side reflectors are so important, and the reflectors that are on the pedals. 4 reflectors on the pedals, so it can be seen from the front and the back.
Now, what would you say to motorists who say that bicyclists should stay off the major roads and that it is a major hazard?
I think that they need an attitude adjustment. Again, this kind of buys into, I have a big vehicle, henceforth I own the road, and we need to remember the streets belong to people. They're the bloodstream of our community. We all need to get to food. We all need to get to work. We all need to get to the places where we make our lives happen. And owning a big vehicle doesn't mean we own the street. Streets are for everybody.
Very important. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to transition to Davis Police Department Bike Officer Mike Yu. Officer Yu, is there an issue with bicycle versus vehicle safety in Davis?
Well, I'm assigned to the downtown area, and what I do see is a high density of bikes and motor vehicle traffic at any given time. The challenges I do see are the transients, and I'm not talking about homeless people, but the student population that come into Davis and ride their bike maybe for the first time in a city, and maybe aren't so familiar with our laws because a lot of them are international students or are from different parts of the country where they don't experience bike riding to a certain level that you see here in Davis.
Mm-hmm. And what about that high concentration of bicycles? I mean, even I experience that when I'm driving around in and around Davis, that sometimes there's hundreds at any given time in the streets.
Right. There are a lot especially on campus and in the roundabouts, it's very apparent if you're ever on campus during a passing time. But in the downtown area, especially during lunchtime, you're going to see a high level of bike traffic in general. And a lot of the time, these students or these people, they don't know all the laws, and they feel like the visibility is better for them on a bike, which allows them to use the excuse that they didn't need to stop at a stop sign because they have 360 degrees of view for them, and they'll just ride past that stop sign and not stop. And that is the issue, because sometimes the cars won't stop, and you'll have these collisions in part where there are bikes versus motor vehicles.
Now, what about the safety for motor vehicles? Being aware of the bicyclists as they're moving around. Should they have a greater awareness because they're driving around?
Well, they should definitely be a little more vigilant when they are in an area such as downtown, when there are bicyclists. They do ride unpredictably, and I've seen that a number of times. They need to be cautious about bicyclists and know that once they're committed to going through an intersection, the bicyclist knows that they should be stopping and yielding to that motor vehicle. I think that's very important. They just need to kind of have that in mind, that some of these bicyclists are very unpredictable. And some of the bicyclists should know that motor vehicles can be unpredictable, or they're going to be in their blind spot or not necessarily see the bicyclist on the roadway. And bicyclists need to be cognizant about that as well.
Now, have you had any issues since you were on a bicycle with motor vehicles coming into near contact with you? It's
funny you mentioned that. I actually had to lock up the brakes yesterday because the vehicle was moving out of a parking stall, backing up pretty rapidly, and unfortunately I was my bike was blocked by a larger vehicle that was parked next to the car, so I didn't see it. And even before that, I almost somebody was opening their car door pretty quick without checking the bike lane, and that's dangerous as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Now, do you do any education training regarding the laws and regulations with vehicles and bicycles?
Yes, we do. In fact, we often set up a stand or a tent display at a high traffic area like 3rd Street and East Street. And we watch for violations to come our way, and we'll stop the cyclist or the motorist and try to educate them on the rules of the road. A lot of these bicyclists don't know that the same rules that apply to them when they're driving a motor vehicle also apply to them when they are riding a bicycle.
Okay. And what advice would you give to bicyclists and drivers? I mean, as you're there at the tent or just right now as we're talking, what kind of advice would you give?
I would say never assume a vehicle or another bicyclist sees you, and always ride or drive defensively as if the other vehicle doesn't see you, or don't anticipate that they're going to do what they're supposed to do, because a lot of the times these accidents are caused by unpredictability or violations of the vehicle code and things that the driver or the bicyclist don't expect the other person to do.
Now, do bicyclists, can they receive citations like vehicle drivers for not obeying the laws?
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the main concerns for the businesses and the citizens of Davis that I hear are the bicyclists either run the stop signs or they are not equipped with the proper lighting equipment during night. And yes, they can receive citations for that.
Okay. Now, is there a way, you just spoke about lighting, is there a way that they can get a bike light if they don't have one?
Yes, we do put on, it's called Light the Night events, and it's coordinated by our bicyclist coordinator for the city of Davis. We'll set up stands during sunset into the night where we hand out bike lights. We try to advertise these events on our Facebook pages and in the newspaper, and we try to educate the people who don't have bike lights equipped, and we give them free bike lights.
Excellent. Also, I wanted to add that I notice as I go through downtown Davis that probably a warning maybe you can share with the public is reducing the speed. I see both vehicles and bicyclists going probably a little faster than they should
Right.
in that downtown area. And there's even pedestrians a lot of times crossing.
Right. Exactly.
So maybe you could talk about just, kind of reducing the speed overall so they have better reaction time.
Yeah, reducing your speed is essential in avoiding accidents and response times. A lot of times I do see frustrations in the drivers where there are pedestrians and bikes who just don't practice right of way, and they'll just continue to walk across even though it's the vehicle's turn to go, and then it messes up the flow of the right of way of the four-way intersection, especially during lunch. So I think it's important if you decrease your speed and practice right of way, especially if you're a pedestrian or a bicyclist, then you'll reduce the amount of collisions in the downtown area.
Okay, thank you. Have you seen any injuries or deaths due to collisions between bikes and cars or trucks?
I do see a lot of injuries. There are a few deaths, but I can tell you from experience that the collisions involving a vehicle and a bicyclist are usually going to include an injury, and that injury is going to usually be the bicyclist who's injured. And that's just because, it's a bike versus a vehicle, and, they're not going to be equipped. A lot of these bicyclists aren't even wearing helmets because they are over 18 and they're college students, but at the same time, it's going to depend on whose fault it is, just varying on the investigation. So
is it so it's not always the vehicle's fault then?
It's not always the vehicle's fault, and it's not always the bicyclist's fault.
Okay.
It should, it's a number of factors, and it's just dependent on the type of collision it is.
Okay. Now, would you recommend adults wearing a helmet even though they don't have to by law?
Absolutely. And I know it's not the coolest thing, but absolutely I would, because head injury is always going to be a factor when you're involved in a bicycle versus a motor vehicle accident.
Okay, thank you very much. Maria, do you have any parting thoughts on the relationship between motorists and bicyclists on our roads?
Well, myself having chosen to be a very car-light person and choosing to do the majority of my transportation on a bicycle instead of in a car, I really want to reach out and invite drivers to become cyclists too, become a bike rider within your community, and have that perspective. And it's really more about the joy of riding a bike. It's much less stressful than driving. There are much less things to actually be aware of because you can focus on your riding. I feel safer on city streets in my bike because I've been trained and I now have confidence. I know where I belong. I know how to communicate with drivers. And so I want to invite car drivers to get on their bikes, drag them out of the garage, and get them fixed up. The Bike Garage and the Bike Campaign can help you do that. And we can help you have street confidence. And even if you decide in the end not to use a bicycle, you will become a better driver. You will become a better citizen because you'll understand that we're all sharing these streets together.
Okay. And Davis Police Department Bike Officer Mike Yu. As we're wrapping up this time, what precautions do you take and what do you recommend as you're on a bicycle and then for others that are on bicycles in high traffic areas?
Never assume the other traffic sees you. Always be vigilant and always look around at your surroundings. Notice the flow of traffic. Don't be distracted by having your earphones in or being on your cell phone while you're riding your bike. Come to complete stop at stop signs and obey all traffic laws.
Okay, thank you, Officer Mike Yu, for sharing with us on this podcast.
You're welcome.
Maria, can you let the listeners know the information and how to get in contact with the Bike Campaign and the Bike Garage?
Absolutely. My name is Maria Contreras Tebbutt, y sí se habla español aquí. So we are available to speak to people in Spanish also. I'm always available through my direct phone number, 530-753-1125. We answer questions all the time about anything that relates to people trying to use a bicycle as a form of transportation in our community and throughout Yolo County. We also have a wonderful website that'll answer a lot of questions, and we are thebikecampaign.com, THE, bikecampaign.com. You can check out all of our website that'll have a lot of information. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Call us, talk to us. We want to know how we can help you enjoy using the streets, being a part of the community on a bicycle, living a car-free or car-light lifestyle.
Okay, thank you so much, Maria. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
For information about the Yolo County District Attorney's Office, visit our website at www.yoloda.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for weekly updates as we seek justice and do justice.